I mean, they need to be punished because they're poor, because it's their fault that they're poor. That's that was the public opinion. You put like 10 bankers in one place, probability is higher that we will have a financial crisis more soon. But I mean, sooner, not more soon. Please excuse my English today; it's horrible. Or one banker dies because get hunted by the mob. Then how was it? Liberty, equality, fraternity, solidarity. Do you know? That reminds you of something? No, it doesn't, because you are actually not a Freemason.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to chapter 5, finally. But actually not. This is not chapter 5. And also welcome to a better audio quality. I hope at least it is connected. Yes, it is. Well, welcome to the pre-introductory lecture, or pre-introduction lecture, however you want to coin it, of chapter 5, which deals with governance and liability. This is, as you may have seen, one of the longest presentation I've done so far, and it was actually the one that was the most fun, because I just you will see, or you saw already. Maybe I will do a coming up or something that I will put in front of the video. So since this took me like time, this video, I'm quite tired now, because actually this is the last video that I produce. This one is the actual presentation. Governance and liability. Why the heck should you know about governance and liability, you may ask yourself. And I will tell you, because you will learn a lot of stuff in this lecture, which you don't find in the reference book, but in another book, which I will show you in the next slide. And it's super interesting. It's really interesting. It was even interesting to me, so has to be interesting to you. However, I talk again too much, so let's have a look at the next slide. Let's see what I present to you in this presentation, which actually is mainly only done at the whiteboard. No, not mainly. It is only done at the whiteboard. All right, let's have a look. All right, and here we are at the overview. Why should you consider to know about corporate governance? Well, and why do I actually do a pre-introduction lecture? Well, because to understand the subject, at least my way of handling that, of getting the best understanding of a subject, I just look into the history of it. And this is also what I've done here. And I found something so useful and worthy, a book, which will appear in a second here, and is called The Modern Corporation and Private Property by Mr. Adolf A. Bierle and Gardner C. Means. Mainly everything's from that book that I will present you in the next few minutes. Why should you even consider to know about corporate governance? You should, because, and especially about this history thing here, this history lecture, because it explains a lot, and is also pointing at things which you take as normal, and tells you, oh, it's not normal. Something is off here. Maybe. Who knows? And generally with the corporate governance system. And that's why you should consider to know about it. And generally you should consider to know about it because you should just consider to know stuff. That is a basic law that you must follow in your life. So let's have a look. What we will have a look at, the first thing will be property and transition. We will have a look at what actually is property. Second, what property has to do with social insurance and why they are related, and why, if one wants to find out about transition of property, one will, with no other way around it, end up in the social insurance history, so to say, development, better to say, coming up. I don't know, however you want to coin it. And then we will have a closer look at the property itself. So what happens with the property itself in this transition phase? Actually, just besides, this book here is from the 1930s. So you may think, I know, but when you are in university, if you are in university, if you are actually there, then I'm sorry, but then you should always quote from the most recent and the latest studies and the latest books and so on and so on and so forth. But actually, this is crap. I mean, at least here, because in this case, I mean, I just don't I just don't care. This is important and this is valuable and this is what you should know. And then if you find another fancy book from 2023, that's fine. But I will present you this one. simple as that, because you will see why. You will just see why. And the second thing, and actually this is already the last, this is after a long time, then the last thing, and that is the appearance of the corporate system, so how the corporate system was coming up. But this is only the main topics. We will also have a look at the dispersion of stock ownership. I mean, this actually, point 3 and 4 is not included, so to say, as point 3 and 4, but it is somehow implemented into these two ones. And number 4 is the evolution of control, also included in the first two. So, I mean, all these topics will be dealt with, but mainly it will be the first two, and these two, they are somehow, then they will find their way in at this point or at that point. So this is actually the overview of this short presentation. And excuse me that that I sound maybe tired and stuff. I am tired because it's what time is it? It is 1:29 in the night, and I'm still sitting here. Yeah, poor me, and presenting a Governance and Liability, a book from the 1930s, from 1932 actually, to you. Yeah, because I just do these kind of things. So just let me continue, and don't wonder, it's not that I'm a magician or something, just because of the time now I do wear something different than when the presentation is starting, and then somewhere I will start to wear this shirt. But I think you just don't care about these things. And if you do, then now you have the explanation that for the people which care about these things, yeah, they are satisfied by now. Right. There will come. There's one more slide. And it's not a slide. It's just me again, which tells you what you have to do. Then you will be presented with a small video of 100 seconds, and the task. You need to anticipate this time, actually, in this presentation. It's not a presentation anymore. I mean, it's like it's really like a journey. I got so much into it. It's fun. Well, that's what you can expect. And after these 100 seconds of clips, you will be then in the presentation itself, starting with property in transition, then appearance. Yeah, I mean, I'm all that I've mentioned already. So you should be prepared on what awaits you. So thanks, and me, I will go to bed now. Have a good one, wherever you are watching from. Thanks for watching, and enjoy this funny, interesting, fascinating, because I was fascinated at a point that I did not realize time anymore, presentation. I wish you a lot of fun with it. Thanks. Yeah, you may assumed that I would be at the whiteboard already. I'm not. I'm still here. And that is because, first of all, I wanted to present you some, let's call it scenes. So some historical scenes, and your, I don't know, the question you should have in mind while watching them for the next, I think, 100 seconds or something like that, is how people in that time that you will see in a few seconds, how did they even organize themselves? I mean, not from a way of living, but I mean, how were they able at these times to organize a company? How would you do that? And to get a feeling, therefore, I will show you, I will present you these cuts from a video that I myself got from YouTube. It is linked in the description. I just cut it together. So that is your homework for the next 100 seconds. Because then, because actually this question will be answered. But I want to know first, or I want to stimulate your brain to think of it as well. So that you are actively inbound into the process and you are not just listening to a blonde person sitting in front of a computer talking to you. Yeah, so let's have a look. Question, don't forget. Don't forget. I mean, yeah, I just spoke 100 seconds now. You cannot have forgotten it. You know the question. Right, here we are at the whiteboard, and now we will have a look at the transition of property. What is meant thereby? So maybe I should just write something here. Let's call it CG lecture, standing for corporate governance, and pre what I said, pre introduction. So pre introduction, CG lecture. Well, quite a name. All right. So therefore, we have to ask ourselves. We want to know what is property and why property is in transition and what the heck does all that mean. So then it is maybe an idea to imagine again or to ask again, what is a corporation? Because who is owning property usually? Corporations. I mean, of course, you can also own property, but property became a thing once people were saying, okay, that's mine. Yes. And who is saying about a lot of things, that's mine? Yeah, well, that are corporations. Because they just own a lot of property. So, question is, again, even though we should know which color I use now. I don't know. Maybe this one here. If it's working, then I will use it. So, question, what is a corporation? That is the main first question. What is a corporation?
corporation. Question mark. Alright, now it has the same color. I don't like that. Well, I have to deal with it. So what is a corporation? We know from the previous lectures that, for example, UCIs are undertakings for collective investments. So, undertakings, that seems to be the word which goes along with corporations, because somehow UCI is a corporation, you remember? I mean, they need to be incorporated via the SARL or via as an SE, like that's the corporate forms, then they need a legal structure, and so on. And so, yes, how these undertakings have then been, I mean, then we know UCI is a form of a corporation, yeah? So, form of corporation. So, that is the first thing that we have in mind. So, how then these corporations, if UCI is one form of corporations, then we know now already, then, okay, it's in Germany would be the GmbH, in English is the limited company, and all these things that are corporations, all right? So actually, or companies, but I mean, corporations are a little bit bigger. So usually they are structured not as a private limited partnership. No, as a public, of course. But that doesn't matter. The thing is, we want to know like how these things function, because we want to know, like, we need to know how do they function, or how did they function before, prior to now, to understand what happened with the property. So, and how that was changing due to the changes of corporations or companies or businesses, call it however you want to call it. So what we need to do is we need to have a look at the, how we call it, the historical overview and when we are talking about corporations, to go through the history of corporations, we'll do that by, no, that's a good idea, by the historical overview of insurance, of social securances, or better to say of social insecurity, I wanted to say, but it's social security, of course. Social insecurity is something else that you may look up in the DSM-5 or in the ICD-10. Historical overview of social security, because, yeah, I put it here, like, because we want to know, of course, the history of corporations, and that goes hand in hand. We will see. And actually, it doesn't matter even, like, if we go through the history of corporations, automatically we will have an overview of the development of social, again I wanted to say insecurity, of social securities. Well, so how did all that things start, corporations in that form as we know them? Well, what comes to my mind? There's the, well, what is sure that in the Middle Age, in Europe at least, not in Latin America, for example, that was a little bit different there. I mean, with the development of cities, which happened to happen already 2,000 years before the Middle Age, no, 4,000 years, 3,000 years, whatever. But with the development of cities in the time of the Middle Age, the medieval times, guilds came up, and many may know that here from, I don't know, some computer games or something. But actually guilds were a real thing, but they are similar than the ones you can, I don't know, join or whatever in various games. But what actually is a guild? A guild is an association of artisans or merchants. Merchants? Yeah, merchants is the word. And why did they do that? Because these, well, we put it just here, is a association. Today I really cannot write anymore. Association. Merchants. I mean, so I think nobody still is able to read all that, and but otherwise I don't feel like I'm really doing something, so I need to write something. So it's an association of merchants and artisans. So why did they do that? We can put it like this. Why? Question mark. Yes, why did they? It looks like a two, but you know it's a question mark. Why did they do it? Because, well, they wanted to sell stuff in a city. Who owned the city, or who claimed to own the city, was some, I don't know, some monarch maybe, yeah. And this monarch, of course, rules it. Thereby, the guilds cannot just claim the city. I mean, cannot just they cannot just say it's their city. So actually, they need to get an, I don't know, a grant, some approval from this monarch to operate within that city. And why do they want to operate within the city? Well, it's the same like nowadays. You can open a store. I mean, if you or you, for example, Gucci or Louis Vuitton, some of these stores, some of these providers of luxury clothing, textile, are leatherware goods, whatever. They are not opening a store in the middle of nowhere because that's just not a good concept if you want to have some sales. So, where of course you can get the most out of it, of course, in cities. That's the reason why they build up, so to say, these skills. I mean, like how they build up. Yeah, I don't know if that's actually the word, but actually, why did they form an association to support? What's the word? To their interests. To, God damn it, to support their interests. No, to, you cannot say you to force their interests upon everyone. No, but to, I would put now to support their interests, but you know what I mean. Support their interests. And that means, of course, profit. They want to have some profit. I mean, the interest of whatever business is not to make no profits, actually. Of course, if you are a non-profit organization, then yes. But in all the other cases, maybe not. So, and with the development of guilds, happened it that because there were an association of these merchants, or the early forms of banquiers, so the bankers in Italy, they also came up in guilds. And that was also not only because they wanted to support their interests, but also, of course, and to gain profits, but because they wanted to have some form of stability, some form of group, which makes it more easy to operate. Because, I mean, if you put like 10 bankers in one place, probability is higher that we will have a financial crisis more soon. But, I mean, sooner, not more soon. Please excuse my English today, it's horrible. Um, well, but of course, also, they are better able to support themselves. So imagine one banker gets sick, or one banker dies because get hunted by the mob. Then the other 9 bankers can pay for, yeah, his wife or his husband, her husband, and that's actually a good thing, isn't it? So this is, so to say, a first form of social security. And when did all that come up? Yeah, well, I mean, in these kind of forms, I'd say like in the 1200 something, 1300. But I mean, the early forms, in which this could have, in which these kind of things could have also happened, was like already 800 with the destruction of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire. The Eastern was a little bit prior to that. No, the Western was, yeah, it was the Eastern Roman Empire. I don't know, somewhere in 800, I think, 900, it was gone. So at that, around that time, I think these kind of things were already established. Well, so financial help is a second thing that we can put here. Financial help, help on general support. I mean, like, they support each other. Otherwise, it would not make sense to build an association or a union. So, of course, this is one point. And yes, that's actually everything about that. So, when, for example, and also what is to remember is that for the guilds we do have universities. For example, this is just a side fact, but why not? We'll put it here. I think in 2000, in 1088 AD, in Italy it was in Italy, and it was in Bologna, because there was a, yes, Bologna, and then short after the University of Paris also, that was 1150 university. Yeah, why why is that happening actually? And it was not just because they were bored and they were thinking like, oh, what can we do? I will just invent a university so we can talk a little bit. No, what I said, I forgot it. 1155, I think it was. Is it? Yeah, no, 1150. It was AD, Paris University. So if we have some US viewers, you see, that is what is called tradition. Um, Paris University, and I will. That were these ones were one of the earliest universities. Oxford. Oxford is also, it was 1096, I think. 1096. That is actually a D. Yes, AD. Oxford. So Oxford is also kind of old. And well, why did that happen? Yeah, well, because of course, if you put some people which have knowledge, because they are in guilds and they, of course, share their knowledge with each other, they support each other, they help themselves, so to say, and they support their interests, they will gain some knowledge for that. And in what they will gain knowledge? Well, in basically everything that is related to cooperation, or in that situation, to a guild. Yes, and this knowledge, it makes sense to sell that knowledge, because of course universities weren't free that time, but actually to Bologna many were traveling there, I mean, like from all over Europe to learn there. So you see, you learned something. You learned guilds are the creators, the founders of universities in the form that we have them today. Okay, so this is actually like the first thing that came to mind, but of course there's all kinds of stuff happening before, let's put it that way, prior to that. I mean, I think the first law text even that dealt with corporate law as well was the Hammurabi law. Yes, so I think this is the first one. It's from, I think, 1750, around that time, BC. Hammurabi law, and this had quite specific exchange rates and laws in it, ethical laws, so to say. I mean, trading laws, which, yeah, tried to provide some security in business. Because actually, this is the Hammurabi law is from the Babylon. Yeah, Babylon. I don't know how to pronounce it in English. Yeah, and actually, they are the founders. Babylonian system. Babylonian law, Hammurabi law. But I mean, of course, then came the Roman, the Greeks, and before that came the old Egypt, and so the ancient Egypt, not the old Egypt. And well, but we put that aside. We start here with the guilds, and here we are like around about 800. What is it? AD. I wanted to put ED. BC. Okay, guilds. Then, what happened then? What happened next? These guilds were, now we are here, what are we? We're in the 16th century, I think. Yeah, I hope so. No, actually it is the truth. Don't worry. So, 16th century, what happened? Someone had a new idea. And this new idea was to build so-called friendly societies. Friendly societies. Sounds nice, huh? And these friendly societies, so here guilds, yeah? Here, friendly societies. They are actually fraternal organizations. I can put it maybe here, fraternal organizations, and I mean we could call them nowadays that way. And what are fraternal organizations? Yeah, you know that. It's like the Freemasons and stuff like that. So they actually, they were a little bit more advanced, and they improved. They invented a life insurance. Life insurance. So it was quite a good thing to be in to one of them, into these friendly societies. And where did they actually came from? They came, regrettably, not. No, they came from the UK. I wanted to say regrettably they didn't come from Germany, but no, they actually came from the UK, and we know that the UK was the owner of the American colony, so it's not that far off that then, of course, friendly societies also were established quite soon in the US, which was not the US by then, but soon after. Or was it? No, it was not. It was 1870. You know, how was it? Liberty, equality, fraternity, solidarity. Do you know? That reminds you of something? No, it doesn't, because you are actually not a Freemason with a high percentage. At least I can predict that. So the Freemasons, for example, one of these friendly societies, they came, I put it again here. So Freemasons, they established themselves. I mean, here we are talking only about the US, yes, in this brackets here. Freemasons were 1730. They established themselves. And what else do we have there? Like, there are many of them. But I actually, then there's the odd ones or something. The odd ones, was it the odd ones? The odd ones. The odd ones. I think the odd ones. The odds. I had the odds. That's the thing. And the odds, they came short after the Freemasons. Don't ask me now exactly when. I only know about the Freemasons. Why do I know actually about the Freemasons? Good question. Actually, do you know who is member of the Freemasons? Well, it's certainly not me, but it's quite interesting. For example, Bolivar was a Freemason, and Bolivar, as you know, was the fighter for the independence of Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru, Panama, Bolivia, I said already, and Colombia. Yeah, nowadays it's Colombia. Nowadays. I'm not that old that I still know when it was not Colombian. Yeah, so he's actually a 33rd degree Mason. He was. Benjamin Franklin, of course, the founder of the U.S. was also Freemason. You see, 1730 they arrive, 1776 already a new state. I don't know, and then with Bolivar the same. Yeah, they have something with that. I don't know, but it's interesting to know that. So Franklin and Roosevelt was as well at the Masons' 26th president. He was actually initiated in 1911. So Roosevelt, you can be out of conspiracy stuff because Roosevelt was initiated 1911, but he was president prior to 1911, but from 1901 to 1909. So, nah, bad for conspiracy, but he was governor of New York in 1929 when he was, I think, 32nd Mason degree. So, there you have something for the conspiracy again. All right, and then the odds, how they're called, the odds, Amitikia Amor ad Veritas. That's if you are a member of the Odd Fellows. I think that's the name, the final. I mean the original name, the Odd Fellows. Then you know that a slogan. And actually, when did they get it? Was 1800 something, not 1820. No, I think it was 1819. I hope so. If it's not correct, then I will put something above the video so you will be able to distinguish it from false information. And from the odds, for example, Winston Churchill was a member after he initially was part of the Conservative Party in the UK. Then in 1904 he changed to the Liberals to become a Liberal, and then in 1907 he got a member. I mean, he became a member of the Odd Fellows. And yeah, where was it? In Manchester, I think. Yeah, in Manchester. Manchester Northwest was the election that he won in 1906. Good guy. And then 1 year later, he was like, all right, so maybe I will join the odds. And who else was a member there? The wife of Roosevelt. How was she called? Eleanor Roosevelt. She was, so you have a Freemason and you have an odd an odd one next to that. But also like people like Charlie Chaplin was in the odds. Then Sir Baldwin. How was Stanley Baldwin, Prime Minister from UK from 1923 to 37, I think. Well, and yeah, many other people. So after this small excursus about secret societies, and I wanted to say friendly societies, of course, yeah, we can come back to the topic. So life insurance, that's what they invented. And not only life insurance, but also life insurance for your family. Even better. I mean, in a time that you have, otherwise the option is nothing or life insurance for you and your family, that's a good thing. So it was worth thinking about joining. All right, so this was the 16th century, so 1500 something, yeah? Now we are continuing 1601. 1601, what is it, AD? And what happened 1601? Why this specific date? Well, because in 1601 there was the establishment of the, how was it called, the poor law. The poor law that was like established in 1601, also somehow a UK invention. But wait, later the Germans will make the race. But poor law was starting 1601, but it was also, poor law was a poor law because it was a systematic, actually it was the first systematic codification of English ideas of responsibility of a corporation, or better to say, the estate, that you have to see in that way as a corporation, and for the welfare of the citizens. this is actually, yeah, it's cool. So to all the UK viewers, it's a really good part. It's a really nice thing. Uh, yeah, and but if you actually read it, it's like they divide the poor between worthy and unworthy poor. Yeah, it's a nice idea. Of course, it is not a nice idea. But 1691, maybe I should also write something here. It's the poor law, or the poor laws, better to say. It was not only one law. I mean, that was then established and continued. Um, that is the next thing when we have a look at what makes a corporation, what is property. That is still what we have in mind after going through Freemasonry and so on. And poor law, UK. Why? I mean, why? Yeah, of course, to help the poor, but actually they were. It was quite funny. I mean, funny is of course not funny, but it was quite interesting in its organization because the. I mean, of course, this happened in 1601 in the UK. I put it here like there's the unworthy and the worthy poor. And do you know who were able to decide who is a unworthy poor and who is a worthy poor? The elderly of a town. So imagine you have a narcissistic town. I don't want to live there, but luckily I don't. So that's one point, unworthy, and the who decided that. So yeah, I just put the elder of a town. How do you say that in a good way? The elders of town, where indecision. I just put it that way. That they were making all the decisions of who is unworthy poor. Who is it? Yeah. The strange kind of society. But thereby it was then coming to the US because, yeah, US, as I mentioned. I mean, it was not the US back then, but the American colony. And it just moved also over there, and there it was the same situation. I mean, it got implemented the same way. And, well, so actually the same was then happening for the US. I mean, the same was applied, was applicable for the US, and now we, because of space reasons, now we move into finally something a little bit more advanced here, into the 18th and 19th century. Yes, and what do we have here? I put it now below, I think. Okay, what do we have here? We have the almshouses and the poorhouses in the US. This is the time of almshouses. And you may still wondering, like, why the heck is he telling me about almshouses, about friendly societies and all that stuff when we want to know what is a corporation? Yeah, well, we want to know what is a corporation, but we want to know actually what is property and why and how did it change, and this is what we need to know therefore. So be patient. So almshouses and poorhouses. Poorhouses. What's that? I mean, it's self-explaining that. I mean, you are not living in the 18th or in the 19th century, so maybe things changed a little bit, and your understanding of almshouses and poorhouses differ a little bit from the time of the 18th and 19th century. And those who received relief back then could lose basically everything. Their right to vote, their right to the property rights, to move. I mean, I can't speak today. They could be even held in a place. So it's not good to be poor. I mean, it's not good to be poor, to be poor and to be into that system of almshouses and poorhouses in the 18th and 19th century. But actually, it's never good to be poor. I would not just I mean, like, no, it's not good. It's not useful. And but back then, definitely not. So, and actually, they also had to wear a P in certain states, in certain towns. They had to wear a P on their clothing to, yeah, I mean, to announce their status. So that says a lot about that is speaking a lot about the understanding, understanding, no, of the U.S. citizens and their perspective on the poor, maybe nowadays. And well, there has been also, I mean, besides the almshouses and poorhouses, there was also the system of outdoor relief. Was it called outdoor relief? Yes, that is like that is why I think that is the reason why U.S. people, like U.S. guys, they like to give a lot of tip. Actually, this was not like seen in a. I mean, the society in general was like from they were not convinced of the outdoor relief and they didn't like to support it, but there were some that supported it, of course, otherwise it would not exist. And yes, I mean, like the public opinion, of course, of the ones which were not poor, this public opinion was that this by the outdoor relief you're making it too easy for them. I mean, they need to be punished because they're poor, because it's their fault that they're poor. That's that was the public opinion. So otherwise, you don't put someone a P on their clothing to say you're poor. Uh, well, so that was the view back then. What is the next thing that comes to your mind? Well, then there was a French Revolution, so we changed a little bit to now we are leaving the US. The US. I mean, as you know, the French Revolution did not take place in the US, which at that time was not even well. No, it was already been established. But 1795, there was a guy. Yeah, this is even. I don't need to put this strange sign. Yeah, what is it? AD. There was a guy in France that was called Thomas Paine or Paine. I have no idea how to pronounce him, but I know how to write him. That's at least something, I'd say. Thomas or Thomas, and then it was yeah like Paine but with an E in the end. Paine E. I don't know. And this guy published in France. Um, well, what is it? A pamphlet, I think, that was called Agrarian. What's the name? Agrarian Justice. What is it? I've had aquarium in my head, but agrarian justice. Yes, agrarian justice. And what is this guy actually saying in Aquarius justice? But I can't speak. Today is really, I'm really sorry, but I can't speak. Thomas Paine is claiming in his pamphlet Agrarian Justice. Now I've said it, I think, the fourth time. In 1795, I think it was then translated 1797 in English and also published in the US. But he claimed or he wanted to install a system which advocated the creation of a social insurance, actually. A social insurance scheme for the aged and for the young people. So the aged people receive money and the young people receive money. Where do they receive the money from? Because he cannot just invent the money out of nothing. I mean, actually, this is how it is done these days, but you always need to have a explanation. Yeah, and I think it was 10% of that would he suggested to install a 10% tax that in on inherited property. Well, basically, he had the idea like, okay, if it's that kind of property, then you need to pay some taxes for that. And this is actually still the case. I mean, like, depending on how you design it, you have to pay taxes of inherited property. But this is how he wanted to solve it. Yes, so here we have the next pioneer in social insurance and in social in the question, what is a corporation? Okay, so what happened next? What happened next in that chronic here? 18 18. What I choose for the next one? 1862. Why 1862 and not 1861? You would think, huh? The Civil War started 1861. Why he's putting 18? Well, because the Civil War started in April 1861. I think the 11th or the 9th. It ended on the 9th and it started at the 11th. Yeah, because short after the Civil War broke out, there was an installation called the Civil War Pension, the Civil War Pension Program. That was how it called. Civil War Pension Program, and this is actually the official name that it had. This was established 1862, so short after the war started. But actually, there has been one in 1776 that was called something else, like the pension program for soldiers, national pension program for soldiers, something like this. So it wasn't the first one, but this was actually the first full-fledged pension program. But of course, not not for like not in terms of insurance, but only of course for veterans, as the name says it. Yeah, this was quite new because I mean everyone that got disabled due to the war got a pension. Also, widows and orphans got the same pension than the guy would have. I mean the already dead. I don't know how to say it correctly. Soldier would have received, and by 1910, I think 90% of all the remaining Civil War veterans were receiving funds from these Civil War pension program. So it was actually a good thing. That was the first time that USA got themselves together and created a functional pension program. So, well, this is during, I mean, due to Civil War, I mean, that makes actually no sense to write it even because it is in the name. But, yeah, well, I don't want to write it down or everything. You just have in mind it's the Civil War Pension Program. And this is actually not standing, I mean, all this stuff is not standing in the book, by the way. It's just what I have in my mind. Therefore, this lecture is so structured, because I actually invented, I mean, I don't invent these numbers and facts, but I invent how I want to move on with this. And how do I want to move on? Good question. I think in 1882 there was, there was a company that was producing pianos, and there was, I have the whole time Darwin, but it was also not Dodge, it was Dolce or something. Dolce. No, it wasn't Dolce, it was Dolce. Alfred Dolce. 1882. Yeah. So now we're 1882. Here we have the Alfred Dolch Company. Why the heck should you know about the Alfred Dolch Company, which produced like pianos and stuff? Was it with O or with U? Dolch? No, it was with O. I think it was with O because otherwise it would. Alfred Dolch Company. Otherwise, he would have remembered me on a franchise restaurant chain here in Germany, and it didn't, so it has to be with an O. And so, Alfred Dolch Company, why you have to know about it? I mean, you don't have to, but no, that I can actually put. They were the first company offering. I could just offering like a company pension. That's what I'm looking for. A company pension. Aha. So now we are coming closer to the cooperation and all that stuff. Aren't you happy? All right. So, but I think in 1900 there were only like 5 companies in total which offered company pensions, and while Mr. Alfred Dolch was a really nice person, because I think he said something like, yes, I mean, my machines are, I have to pay for my machines every year, that they are still working, that they, I mean, the amortization, so to say, and the same I have to do for my workers. But regrettably, this company, did not live that long, and it was not possible to receive any company pension because actually he was withholding the money. And of course, when the company is not there anymore and it was just an idea and it was not thought through, then someone else will do it later. And that is the good thing, because this is then actually what happens. So in 1900 it have been 5 companies, as I remember, but yes, in 1932, I think 15, only 15, yeah, okay, it was also in the midst of the Great Depression. Only 15% of the workforce in general received any funds. So still not a good thing, not yet, but this was actually the first company that offered company pension. And now finally, where can I continue? I mean, I will just talk and I will just I will just talk, yeah. 18 no, now we are moving into 1935, and I think here we can also stop in 1935, because the actual book I will talk about after all this conversation, after all this talking here, was written in 1932, I think. So 1935 is the time that we are in. And what happened in 1935? Can you imagine? Well, in 1935 happened something that is called the Social Security Act. And the Social Security Act, ladies and gentlemen, I will put it extra in another color to underline its importance. Security Act. Yes. This, I mean, the Great Depression, I mentioned it already, beginning 1929, was the third huge depression of the modern era, because actually there has been one in the 1840s and then in the 1890s. Maybe you know the story of Coxey? Yeah, Coxey, I think that was his name. Coxey? Yeah, it was the Coxey Marsh. Yeah, it was a Coxey Marsh, I think. Well, the Coxey Marsh. Coxey, yeah, it was Coxey. The Coxey March, the Coxey Army, that was in 1894, I think. And there was a guy that was coming from Ohio, I think, Mr. Coxey. And yeah, well, I mean, they were in a depression. The situation was bad, really bad. And he decided to ask all the workers which were unemployed of the whole country to join him to his march on Washington. And he actually gathered 10,000 homeless, I wanted to say, unemployed workers that lost their job, or just didn't find any, and marched on Washington. But in the end, I mean, like, because they had to walk a little bit, and in the end, only 500 were left. Because I mean, the rest was just walking a little bit, and then they were talking a little bit, and then they said, "Okay, I go home, thanks." And and then he was arrested when he entered, when he put his feet on the grass of the Capitol. Yeah, I mean, courageous man. He later then, I think, he later, yeah, he applied still to be a politician, and he was actually not so successful as a politician. But he was a really populist back then. So this was the second social security, the second depression, and then the third, the Great Depression, known under that name, happened 1921. President back then was, I mentioned it already before, and it was no. Before, Hoover was the president, and Hoover came on the good idea to say, well, I mean, we can just handle that situation with voluntarism. And Hoover just dismissed, and I don't know what he was doing in general, but he just, yeah, he tried to solve it like this. Then people should just help more. The thing that did not work, even back here, yes? I mean, like, when you when you don't like to support, how was it called, the outdoor relief, because you think the poor have to be punished for being poor, and then you come, like, I don't know, 100 years later on the idea to say, well, it was always working good, uh, just give some more to the poor. Not a good idea, Hoover. But then in 1932, excuse me, the next president got elected, and that was Roosevelt, and he came up with a new alternative. Maybe I just want to I need to say that this new alternative that Roosevelt came up with in 1934, when he created the SEC. No, the SEC is something else. The CES, the other way around. And then Germany, of course, already was established for a long time in a social security system and schedule. It was 1889, just a few years prior to that, almost like 50, no, 40, 45. Well, so this was Roosevelt's brave new idea. And in 1934, after there have been many movements like Share Our Wealth, Every Man a King, from Huey something, I forgot. No, I don't forgot. What was his name? No, it sounded like a Chinese name. Long, I think. Huey Long, something like this. Yeah, there were many many movements that came up during the Great Depression, which supported this idea, that idea, and also some which which motivated people to spend money. For example, the Townsend movement from Francis Townsend. He also like tried to help people and tried to establish some forms of private engagement, so to say. There have been many movements. I think Fire and Brimstone, and then a writer and his epic, I think, from, was it called Sinclair or Upclair, something. Yeah, a famous writer, Sinclair, I think he was called. Well, and after all these movements failed and nothing worked, then, as I said, Roosevelt came up with the new idea. And actually, at that time, 34 countries worldwide already established or had a correctly functioning insurance system in place, just to mention that. And of course, Germany was the first one under Bismarck in 1889. Well, but Bismarck was not a nice guy. That was a good thing he did, but he was kind of not. I mean, you should have other friends, I think. So then now we know now about the history of social security, and as I mentioned, we need to know that. And yeah, actually, not just to end that before. I mean, he came on the idea 1934, and then he signed it in August somewhere in 1935, and he created thereby also the SBB, the Social Security Board, SSB, not SBB. Well, and also the other institution, the CES, which is the Committee of Economic Security. And well, now we have an overview about that. And we wanted to know, what is a corporation? And this year, you will know now, you will just let me clean that so that I have some more space. But you will know about why I was telling you all that stuff. Yeah, why I was telling you. You will know in a flash. Now, what is a corporate form? Part 2. So, you know now about the social security insurance, excuse me, which is the same somehow. And now, what then is a corporation in times of 1932, 1935, something like this? And the authors claim that the corporate form is, so to say, Copernican change in terms as big as like the feudal system, yeah, that's how you say it, I think. Corporate form marks, so to say, an era like feudal system, yeah, like the feudal system. Yes. And why do they say that? I mean, did you realize that we just established a social insurance? And the feudal system was back then the thing, I mean, in medieval times, was the thing that was also including social insurance, which was the super crappy, and which did not work, and actually there was none. And therefore, I mean, there was one, but that is nothing to, it's not even comparable with social insurance in the way how we usually now understand it. And so this is what they claim. And they also claim that, because you remember we wanted to know also property, what is a corporation, but also property, what is that? Put it also here. So, and they also state that, or they just repeat, better to say, what many historians do say, and that is like the distribution of property is history, basically. So it's a dominating factor. So distribution of property, dominating factor, history. Can you imagine that? I mean, no, it was actually a real question. I mean, you can see it really under that perspective, I think. Because, yeah, well, history always dealt somehow with the distribution of property. If it was in a religious sense, if it was in a state sense, if it was an empire sense, always property was involved. So, what is property? We do know a lot of properties. We know intellectual property. We do know lost property, for example, and all kind of properties, public property. So, the now I have to check the Oxford Dictionary is stating a thing or things owned by somebody. So, thing owned by somebody. Not that difficult. You could also have given this explanation. Somebody, but you didn't. The Oxford Dictionary just was faster. So, things owned by somebody, that is property. And in former US corporations, or what is to be considered as corporations of corporations, the property of the corporation, of the company, or however you want to call it, to coin it, was used by the property by the property owner, which is the business owner, and then also the outcome that came out of the use of this property, of which was owned by the corporation, which was mirrored by the owner. So I think what we can do is we can put owner, property, and corporation here. Well, these are the things, and which play together here to explain a little bit what it makes to property, or how property was structured and organized. And well, all of these three things in former times in the US were, so to say, linked as one. I mean, all that belonged together, and of course the outcome maybe also. Yeah, the outcome, of course, so to say, the profit. And we just prolong it a little bit. All right, so these four things now, they belong together. All that was one. It was not one, but these four things were in a chain that you could not just divide somehow, because it all belonged together. I mean, if you have a guy that is producing some cheese and you take away the cow, then there's no cheese. He cannot sell it then. So it's his property, is the owner, is the corporation, which is the corporation we can imagine as almost as an alter ego, because I mean the corporation has all the rights that the person has. Yeah? It's, so to say, an alter ego person. So, and because it was an alter ego person, it was also linked to the person. So it was everything, so to say, linked to the owner of it, or I mean the outcome, the profits, the corporation, the property, and the owner, of course, is linked to him or herself. It would be weird if that wouldn't be the case. So, and now this is the stage which was known 1800, 1900 still. So, and now imagine, you've seen the video in the beginning. I mean, it didn't look like super, like there wasn't nothing. You saw some skyscrapers, for example. Yeah, so people were able to build skyscrapers already. So now we have something. We are confronted with something that the authors call quasi-public companies. Yes, something weird. What is that? Or better to say, corporations. Yeah. You put a big line, here just some bullet points that you remember it, if you can read it, of course. So now we are here in the 1930s, yeah, and the authors say there's something that is a quasi-public organization, and this quasi-public organization moves all that. It moves it, and therefore it is a new era, like with the feudal system, that starts right now with the appearance of these. They are the guilty ones, the quasi-public companies. And what are these quasi-public companies? That is defined by, I mean, this is a company that commands supply of capital from groups of investors, which are like generally coined as the public investor or investing public. Yeah, so you can put that just here. That means what did I say? Command supply of, I will just put supply supply sorry, supply of capital by, and now investing public. Who is now the investing public? I mean, you imagine like the cheese producer, he has also an investing public, but the investing public invests in him, better to say in his corporate, in his alter ego, yeah, and therefore they get some cheese and he gets some profit, in the best case. And now what is going on here? Because the supply of capital is coming from the investing public but by investing into the company. Well, actually this is the same here, because also the public which is walking in and buy some cheese is investing into the company. But the quasi-public company, this here is a private company. Yeah, this is a private company. And now we do have some strange construct, this quasi-public company, which seems to be a private company, but somehow is also public. So people are confused. At least the authors are confused, and that's good, because thereby they analyze all that stuff, and they come out with, first of all, they look at, so what is it, and they ask themselves like, how is it functioning, and thereby they analyze the functionality, and it's kind of, that's not that difficult. I mean, like function, you know, if it's still writing it wouldn't be difficult. Functionality is, how's it functioning? So actually a quasi-public company operates by drawing the savings back on themselves. So drawing savings back on themselves, because the public somehow owns the company, the quasi-public owns the company, and how do they then like what do they do with the savings, and what does it mean? Yeah, well, a quasi-public company owned by the public, so to say, somehow then wants, of course, to invest money, or at least the savings, the profits, and how they can now invest it, since it is owned by the public, it's a little bit difficult, I think. So, but of course they can, and thereby, but thereby they are drawing it back on themselves. So they need to invest it on themselves again. So you get a feeling maybe for the dynamic. So it's like, okay, that's for the first thing. And how do they do that? They do have like two options. Either they do it directly, because that would be the next thing I'd ask myself, and that's what they ask themselves as well. So directly, and this is via stocks, bonds, yeah. So an individual is getting some stock. Direct way to draw savings back on themselves. And then the second way is indirectly, yeah, of course, what else? and that is via insurance, banks, and so on. Why? Yeah, well, because insurances and banks do also serve um, a public interest, so to say. And for example, a bank acts as a depository, insurance, life insurance, or whatever insurance. I mean, you can insurance everything nowadays. So you see, somehow, because now you can imagine already, this looks like it is super interlinked or interconnected. And actually it is. And what that implications are, we will find out. So, and have always in mind what happens to the property, yes? So now we have a property in a quasi-public company, so which is drawing savings back on themselves. So what then happens with property then? I mean, like, who owns it? Yeah, and we get an idea. That's multiple ownership. Where to put that? Yeah, I just put it here, like, idea, multiple owner ownership, if you can read it, decipher it. All right, so these are the two ways, and so how they actually then secure the savings? Yeah, well, through, I mean, via the stock market, and that's then how they receive it. Yeah, I just asked myself that question. Don't worry. Or of course I can use also the unlisted market, but back then the unlisted market was not that big of a deal. So we see what merges out of that is a separation, because that's what I tried to hint on, to give a hint, separation of capital and control, or how was it? No, of ownership. Yeah, that is also capital with that word, ownership and control. Because I mean, you just have to see the implications, so to say. Ownership, quasi-public. Okay. Control. Who's controlling it? Is the quasi-public? Is the public controlling the company? Okay. Let's have a look. If you own some stocks, do you have control over the company? Well, you do have, but depending on how large the amount of stocks, I mean, the amount of shares are, I mean, how many shares are in circulation, your control is, well, I mean, ownership you do have. You do have 100% ownership of your shares, but control, I mean, how much control does it give you? Like 3 Amazon shares? Not that much. And also, you only have voting rights, because here we are talking, of course, about voting rights of corporate decisions which are taken within the company. If you are a common shareholder and not a preferred shareholder, but usually you are not a preferred shareholder. And so I think thereby it is clear why this thing now is from huge social significance. And now we see property becomes a part of this super social significant issue, because thereby that is designed that way, everything that is related to a company, or to a quasi-public company, now is related to everything. Because let's have an example. I will just make again some space. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the example situation to make it more visible, to point it out better. So we do have the situation that we have, like, which color is the person A? Here we do have person A. Give it a name, whatever you want. I just call it person. You can call it Bismarck. So person A. A is investing into how we put it like C. And maybe I should use another color. Therefore, I had actually different colors in my head. Okay, so here we do have C, and C is a company. Therefore, it is called C. And which company is it? I mean, still we are here in the 1930s. Okay, so this is a company, and this is which company is it? Is a big company, and that is, for example, Warner Brothers. Yeah, Warner Brothers. In 1930, it was 161.7, 160, around about $160 million worth. That is a huge amount of money, and it was listed within the 200 most best performing companies. So it seems like a good thing to invest into it. So we see person A invests in stocks, of course. I put it here, stocks. So person A becomes a shareholder of this person, of this company C, not person C. And now there's a corporate voting upcoming, yeah? So we put that back. So here we have a corporate voting for board of directors, and we do have X, Epsilon, and Z. And A says, I think this Z guy, he's always responsible for a lot of layoffs. Acting ice cold, this guy. So he will bring some profits. Okay, all right. That's what he wants profits. So he's actually voting for Mr. Z. All right. Actually, Z gets the position. I mean, Z is in the board of directors. And then he pushes stuff through, and he is responsible then, that, how we call them, like E for employees maybe. Which color? Oh, this one. Then we have here E, yeah. E. That are 2,000, let's say 2,000 employees, yeah. Okay, and Z just fires this. I mean, they were working like for 20 years for Warner Brothers, for the company. And now Zat is coming up and he says, no. These guys, they're already old, they worked already 20 years, we quit them. We need new people. So actually, 2,000 employees, or better to say now, 2,000 people are reliant on, well, we'll use this color here again, SC we call it, and that's Social Security. And where is Social Security coming from? Where is funded from? Of course, it is coming from, it is paid, I mean, the funds are generated by taxes of employees. So let's put this line, reliant on services, I mean on social security services. Social security is the wrong word, social insurance as well. Here, paying, so to say. Yeah, this is the relation between SC and E. So because they are not working there anymore, and Z is a proud guy and yeah, makes profits. So now these 2,000 employees, they are a set, and they are a set of another color, of course. Which one? Oh, maybe this one here. And they are a set of, because I mean, in general, there are more employees than 2,000, especially in the US. And the set we call R. Okay, this is the set of all employees. So imagine, just picture it, 2,000 employees, which could be R, because E is just a subgroup of R. So somehow you can see them as equivalent, yes? Because E and R are just subgroups working for different companies, because all of them are employees. So 2,000 of them lose their jobs due to Z. Okay, now they're relying on Social Security. And R is a set of all employees. Person A is a person that invested in stocks. So it is quite obvious that person A belongs to the group of R, you know? Otherwise he's just a super rich person and don't belongs to the group of employees, but or maybe not super, maybe he's homeless and owns stocks, but I don't know. The probabilities are high that he is belonging to this set. So R and E, so the guys that they were fired actually from Z, they are A. You understand? Hey, follow? So what does it mean? This means a lot. This is a huge implication. And now you can continue with that thing. So company C is owned by, I don't know, we put it just here, like we can even make it like bubbles or something. That is like, just imagine here in numbers. It's owned by these companies, which invested into that, which own stocks, but which owns huge amount of stocks. So actually, thereby they become part of the public, because these companies are also traded on stock exchanges, and thereby they, so to say, invest their savings back into the public. But the public is responsible, therefore, that the public itself loses jobs and then invests anyways into companies which are responsible, therefore, that jobs are lost. And the employees, are they property of a company? At least they are a resource. Yes. So from a company perspective, from a corporate perspective, employees are, of course, an asset. I mean, what else? So do you see the dynamic behind that? So the interconnectedness of this means these quasi public companies, they actually disrupted the whole system, the whole understanding of a company, of property, of ownership. It's all different, because I mean, the ownership now, like, imagine in 1930s, in 1930 actually, Warner Brothers was having, I don't know how much, 161 million, I think, points. Um, they were worth that amount of money. Imagine how many stocks they have had. And imagine the average company in the 1930s were have, I think they made a profit per year of $5,000. So these super companies, look, the structure this is designed is that companies will have exponent. I mean, some companies, as soon they decide for the corporate form, they will just exponent. I mean, they will have an exponential growth, because due to the form, to it cannot, it must grow. Otherwise, it can, there's no other function how the company could grow, and also the objective change thereby. I mean, like the company now is not interested in actually in gaining profit, and the invisible hand, yeah, is not, nobody cares about that anymore. The only thing people care about, and now everyone cares about, is to generate profit. But due to the interconnections, actually, if you think about it, it is not possible to create profits, because thereby that everything's interlinked, and E is part of R, and that is A. Nobody profits. But this is just a thing to have in mind. Just I wanted to give you this example, that you get a feeling for what is actually happening here. And now, now that we know all that stuff, now we will have a closer look to, I mean, actually we know it already. We know now what happened with property. It was like the property is not owned anymore by the owner, because it just moves to a beneficial ownership, while the stocks, so to say, I mean, while the ownerships themselves, they are smaller and smaller and smaller, but the control, who's in control of the company, gets conglomerated into less and less and less people. And this is a thing that I will, that I will go on that. Sorry, this presentation is actually completely not planned. I'm just doing it out of thin air, so to say. So this will be the next thing we will have a look at to understand in depth now the what happens to property. But just let me put that away again. Then I will come up with a new with new bullet points. After this exciting finding, let's sum it up. Let's make it a little bit more haptic. Yes. So the last thing, or one of the last things I've mentioned was separation of ownership. Actually, I missed an off here. So separation of ownership and control. That's what is happening, and that of course has huge implications, not only on property, but we are looking at property right now. So what does it actually do? As I mentioned, it creates a social significance. So creates social significance. Why? As you've seen a moment ago, you know why. Well, I mean, actually, because owners have now relationships to everything, to co-workers, even to the state. I mean, huge companies. Warner Brothers is a company that pays a lot of taxes, that maybe gets supported. How's it? Today I'm missing just all the words. How is it called? Sub something. Well, however, relationships to consumers as well, of course, and yeah, basically as you have seen before, basically to everything. And this, the authors, excuse me, call this happening here. They call it the, how did they call it? The revolution, the quasi. What's the word? Quasi public, yeah. Quasi public revolution. Why is it a revolution? Well, you've seen before the only the definition of not the definition, the the the, the understanding of property itself changed completely, because I mean, so what exactly is it doing to property? So we imagine property, we've imagined it before, is owned by someone, something. I mean, something is owned by someone. So what does it do to it if we put it in a system, as we have seen just some moments ago? It actually destroys property. So what does it do to property? That's the question that comes out of this one here. I will just put it that way. What does it do to property? And yeah, well, it destroys at least the property. I mean, in the definition as we have it, it's actually destroyed, because it is not. I mean, of course, it's depending on the definition. But if you see someone as one person and not as a synthetical structure created by law, then destruction is the natural outcome of that. So it is the destruction of property in the definition. Even today, you would think, if someone's telling you, yeah, property is something that is owned by someone, and then you just cut this someone in, I don't know, like 80 million people. Yeah, well, then in 80 million pieces, not people, and then yeah, I would call it it's at least a destruction, if you want. I mean, there are other words for that, but that is the result. I mean, that is really. I mean, isn't that fascinating to understand that? I'm really fascinated by that. As you see, it is fascinating. Why? Because it changes everything. And what else does it change? It means that one does not actually own anymore the physical instruments of the production. So again, so how do I put it? I put it like that. What does that mean? Does that mean? And that means one doesn't own the instruments of the production. I mean, owning of production instruments circum what's circumvented, or owning of production instruments diminished. No, it's diminished. Yeah, why? Because now think the production instruments. I mean, in case of the cow guy, of the cheese guy, it was a cow. And well, if you now put the property, which is, I mean, if you destroy, so to say, the cow, I mean, if you cut the cow into many pieces, then you actually, or you own maybe a piece of eye or a piece of ear from the cow, if you want to see it in this metaphor, then yeah, well, you cannot, with a piece of ear, you cannot produce some milk, any milk. At least not these days. Maybe who knows how it looks in, how does it look in 100 years? But so you are not owning the instruments of your production. I mean, you own it, but you own a piece of ear or a piece of feet or however that's, whatever the cow's feet are called, and that is actually the that's also the diminishing, so to say, of production instruments. In this case, it's a cow, but see it as whatever. And now imagine you are the owner of a huge company, that is a quasi-public company, and now you have like super many, I don't know, constructions, and you own whatever, many things, you know, and now you are open to the public market, you're traded on the public market, your alter ego is traded on the public market, and suddenly other people own your stuff. Isn't that weird? So actually, the owner of a public, quasi-public company doesn't own his stuff. I mean, who's owning it then? Yeah, well, it's all these shareholders. But I mean, they own feet and parts of eyes and stuff like that. So that is all the impact that has. And who has the physical control? That's another question. I mean, like, so nobody. I mean, the actual owner, which owned it once in the regular case, does not own it anymore. So who has the physical control? And that's a centralized group. And who is that? Who is, so what about the physical control? I just make it like that way. Physical control of generally of for example, these instruments. The physical control is a centralized group. And who is it? Who has the control? For example, the board. You know, before we were talking about the election process of board members, and they are now, I mean, how many people are in a board? I think in how many, 28 in McKinsey, I don't know, I think it's 28, around 30 are at the, they call it differently. I forgot how they call it. They don't call it board. They have a more fancy name for that. But 30 people have the physical control of the assets of humans, and of everything, computers, cars, planes, I don't know what they own. Yeah, so these guys are in the physical control. And owning, yeah, I mean, you're owning maybe a piece of air that is flying through. I mean, that is existing somewhere in a McKinsey building. But yeah, have fun with it. I mean, you don't own anything actually. I mean, you have no control while your ownership and especially the owning of your production instruments are just, yeah, I mean, forget it. It's really interesting to understand that, for me at least. So what that does is it divides, I mean, it creates, so to say, the nominal ownership. Um, that creates nominal ownership. And what is nominal ownership? Yeah, basically it's this control stuff. And then we have the beneficial. Because as I mentioned also prior, ownership here, the beneficial ownership it becomes a thing now. And well, that means that it's not the individual anymore that owns their own wealth. I think that is something I can also, but I mean the owner, the individual, the owner. So just to clarify that, I will put it that way. Switch the side. What did I say? Yeah, individual is not owning their property, actually. So the owner cannot access their property. So, because the question was what does it to property? I mean, their wealth. Yeah, I mean, yeah, also that. Property and wealth, which can be the same, of course. And additionally, I mean, simultaneously, the shareholders, they can't profit. I mean, that can't. This is one thing. On the same thing, on the same side, I mean, plus, so to say, the shareholders, they can't profit. They can't use the profit. Can't use profits to exaggerate, or just better say, for more efficient, for a more efficient use of property. Because, I mean, the invisible hand, you know, you remember? What does a shareholder, so to say, an owner, what does he want to do with his profits? He doesn't want to go to Las Vegas and just spend it all. No, I mean, maybe some. But what he actually wants from a rational standpoint is he wants to use, of course, his profits to make his property more, yeah, efficient. To make the use more efficient. I mean that's normal. You invest in your own business, so this is also thereby not possible anymore because you're a shareholder and you get profits, but you have nothing to do with the company. I mean, what do you have to do with Amazon? I mean, okay, maybe you buy some stuff there. Maybe you are a consumer. Maybe you work at Amazon. But I mean, anyways, how you want to what is the relation between the profits of the company that you got from from the owners which are not owning that property anymore, and how can you make use of that profit to generate a more efficient use of your property, which is not your property? I mean, which is your property? I mean, one piece of air, but you know, it's just completely, and that is meant by this revolution. That is completely, I mean, I was not aware of that. I mean, maybe I'm just strange and I'm not aware of these kind of things, but and maybe everyone else is, and I'm fascinated. But and then everyone else looking at me and thinking, "Well, okay, it's nice that he's fascinated." But it's super fascinating because it actually really does means a lot. Did you see it before like this? I would like to know. Tell me. Write it in the comments. No, actually, really, I want to know. Do you know about that stuff? What did you think? I mean, of course, if you sit down for 2 years, maybe in your bathroom and you're locked in and you have nothing to think, maybe you come on that. But I mean, me, I did not think about that before. All right. So, and thereby, what happens here? Thereby, yeah, I know it's within the other. What happens thereby is a despaired ownership. I mean, ownership becomes despair. Ownership becomes despair. And that, again, is the origin of two things. And that is the economic power. Sorry, sometimes I'm thinking how to continue my presentation and then I just stare off into the nothingness. And yes, the economic power hereby, what that does, I mean, the despaired ownership creates two things. First, uh, it puts the economic power in a centripetal. Do you know what means centripetal? Do you? Yeah, well, it's a fancy word. It's the opposite of centrifugal. So, you know, you have a circle and stuff is moving out if it moves, you know, and then imagine the opposite. That's centripetal. Actually, me, I never heard that word before. It's a weird word for me, but okay. Economic power, but it's a nice word. You can act like yeah, it's centripetal, and nobody will know what you're talking about, but everyone will say yeah, actually yes, because nobody wants to admit that they don't know. Okay, centripetal development of economic power. Why? Because power is the control, and who is in control? That's the question. I mean, that's what we had a moment ago. Is the board, for example. I mean, people which are in power, in control, actually, which are not the shareholders. Um, so, and the other thing is the beneficial ownership. Ownership becomes exactly centrifugal. Centrifugal. So, while the economic power, so the economic control, moves to a small group here, and it has to be like this. It cannot be any different. It will be smaller and smaller and smaller all the time. It can't change. It has no chance because of the system itself. How? It has no way how this is designed that can be changed. So, and the beneficial ownership. So beneficial ownership means your pieces of air that is in the McKinsey building, and they are moving out. Yeah, why do I put it again here? But yeah, I don't know because I feel like, and no, actually, because I was thinking I put it the other way, the first round. So doesn't matter. That is like the stocks. So imagine stocks. The development of stocks are like this, huge. Or maybe I'm too much up. I put it here. Stocks go up. I mean, like they will become billions in numbers, while power, I just put it in here. Power, I mean, like the economic power, of course, will be like super small. It will be even smaller than that point in comparison to the amount of stocks which are available, or the amount of beneficial ownership. In other words, this is what happens to property. This is what happens actually. This is what happens to property. And what does that mean? Well, that means that if you put it in a mathematical model, for example, and these guys um, from the book did that, you will find out that the atom. No. First of all, the other thing I will say afterwards. First of all, these two things, like the control and the ownership, they build the. Let me put that somewhere here. So ownership plus control, yeah, build, so to say, this here is called the atom of holy crap, can't talk today, the atom of property. And this is now completely, yeah, cut off. There is no atom of property anymore. It's a it's a fusion. It's not a good thing. So yeah, this is destroyed here. Right? So what I wanted to say is that if you put it in a mathematical model and you check, like you have, like, for example, 200 companies. You remember in 1930 it has been. Oh, give me another color here. Okay, this one. 1930s. Just 1930 there were 200 companies. I mean the 200. I mean like the like these 500s today. 200 richest companies, so to say, by stocks, and it has been 200, and they would merge in 376 or 96 years. I forgot it. Something between 350 and 400. They would merge all into one company. So one company in 350 years, because now of course you have to ask yourself, okay, so how can they grow? Because I mean, like, okay, they have stocks and so on, but then they need to grow, because that is the new maxim. That's what they need to do. That's the goal of these companies. They have no other goal. They need to grow, they need to gain profits, and after a time there's no other way than to merge with other companies. So that's one thing. And then I think these 200 will be merged into one company, but 16 of them will be dissolved. I mean, disappeared, better to say. Disappeared through another effect. Yeah, that is the development. So, and that is super fascinating. You may think that's completely not fascinating, because we still have more than one company that is existing worldwide. But if you have a look at what happens, it is always following that system. Thereby, innovation becomes a really new thing, until you look at who owns what, which companies do own what exactly. And in the end, you will find out that actually, even if a new company is existing, at a point in time, it they sell it usually to another company, because they need to merge. I mean, they need to grow. So that's happening with Vio, for example. I don't know if you are aware of that water brand that was bought by Coca-Cola, or Fasti or something that was also bought by Coca-Cola. And of course, it's a nice thing. Then Coca-Cola can grow a little bit by buying these things like water. Everyone needs to drink water, and innovation becomes the driver. But in the end, they, anyways, these huge companies buy it, and then it's part of Coca-Cola. So this is, wait, I will just hold back with that a little bit because this is a part of also of one of the in a that I want to bring up later. So, but now you have in mind. Forget about the model. We will come back to that in another point in another situation. But have in mind what happens to property. Where's property here, by the way? Here, property. What happens to property is destruction. It gets destroyed. The normal idea of property is gone. And now what results therefrom is the destruction even of the atom of property, which is ownership and control, because they get separated. And what happens thereby is that the ownership becomes despaired, and thereby the economic power becomes a point, yes, and the beneficial ownership becomes like the universe, like super huge, like infinite. That is what you have to have in mind. And now it's maybe clear why I was going through the history a little bit, because imagine which kind of change that is. That was not existing before, and this is only existing since 1830. That's actually a good thing, because since when actually this is happening? When did it start? Who is responsible for this mess? And this is then actually now the next point, the second point. Ladies and gentlemen, don't get sleepy here, because actually I'm going to tell you now some interesting stuff after I put the light here in the correct place. I hope it's not on the display, is it? No, it's not. I'll tell you now some stuff that will actually make you think. Yes, I can do this kind of stuff. So and actually yes, I changed my shirt because also me, I do have a life, and then I went to the barber to get my hair cut. I mean, just the sides, but that is not important to you. The point we're looking at right now is the appearance of the corporatism. So how did this stuff come up? That was the question that I mentioned just before. And I mentioned already the date. So the attentive listener will remember that I said at one point in the presentation before that in the 1830s there was actually the first company operating in the corporate form. And which company was it? It was the Boston Manufacturing Company. Yeah, we use the same car. No, I won't use the same car. Can't decide today. So, the Boston Manufacturing Company. So, don't ask me why it was the Boston Manufacturing Company. I cannot tell you. But I can tell you how the development took place. So, actually, 1830s. I mean, in 1830, they were how many? 11 or 17? It was 11. 18, no, but that was prior to that. Right, that the development of the corporate form really started was in the 1830s. So he was, so to say, the start of that. But of course, the company, I mean, it's not of course, but the company existed prior to that as well. And actually, this company was founded in 1813 or 1812, 1813, I think. A company founded, yeah. And how many shares did they have? 11. So here, until here, everything fine. 11 shares. I mean, 11 shareholders, excuse me, which then do have the shares, like something like, what is 100 through 11? Yeah, something like 9.3 or 8.9, whatever, you know, you can calculate it if you want to. So, how do I put it? I will put it here. So, here we always put the shareholders, yes? Good that we talked about it. And here we do have 11. All right, so next thing, 1830. And that's why I mentioned that the actual start was in the 1830s. The shareholders were 76 76 shareholders, and each of the shareholders was only allowed to have, I mean, at maximum 8.5% of the company's, well, worth. I mean, like, of the company's. I mean, they were allowed, one single shareholder was allowed to own maximum 8.5% of the shares. That's what I want to say. What I wanted to say. All right, so we can put some lines here to make it a little bit, to try to make it a little bit more structured. Actually, it's not that important. Okay, 76. It's quite a growth, one can say. All right, then 1850. 1850. It was, I don't know, it was easy because it was 1, 2, 3. So 123 shareholders. But here, I mean, like here, I put it just here, maximum 8.5% per owner. Yeah, and this is actually an 8 and not just some fugazi. All right, 1850, 123, and at that time it was structured that 51% of the shares in total were held by 17 shareholders. So that is quite a thing, isn't it? And only 11% was owned by the actual management. All right. So we remember what we've said before about the division between ownership and control. Yeah, we see how it is taking place. And then 1870, here is the date. And 1870, well, now the shares don't mention anymore, but in 1870 the company was worth $1 million. Okay, so I don't know, if you own $1 million, good for you, but then you have a feeling for how much money that is, but you don't know how much money it is in 1870. It's way more, of course. I mean, don't ask me now how much, but of course it is way more than $1 million today. It will be like really nothing in comparison. So this thing here, this Boston manufacturing example, not the example, actually the first true case of the corporate form, of the development, especially the corporate form. What does it say? Well, it shows thereby the acute growth. I mean the acute growth. How do I say it? Mirrors. Yeah, or how do you call that? Like, I will just put it acute growth, because this is kind of acute, isn't it? It's 1830 to 1870. Okay, use a time span of 57 years. Yeah, I mean, some people died in this time, at that age, in 57 years. So it's not that long, that's what I want to say. I mean, many people live above that. I mean, longer than that, not above. All right, so mirrors acute growth, or extensive, I don't know, excessive growth of this form, actually, because, I mean, like, this is quite uncommon in the 1870s to have, like, a company that is worth $1 million. All right. Until now, you think, all right, yeah, fine, good to know, thank you, or not thank you, but let me tell you something else. If I find a color here, that's there. Yeah. All right. So now we're a fresh color. By this form, one position, or better to speak, one figure was becoming clearly like evident within the corporate form, which was clearly important, very important, and this figure is called well, that's called the promoter. You remember? I think it was in the very beginning, the first chapter of UI's reference book, the promoter. We got to know him already. So I would put it just that way. Important figure. I mean, you have in mind that it is, of course, in this corporate form process, and that is the, I forgot it again, the promoter. Yes, that's the word we're looking for. The promoter. Who the heck is the promoter? It's just someone promoting stuff? No, or yes, depending on how you want to frame it. The promoter, as we also know already, of course, is the one which is, nowadays we would say, I can just put it here in brackets, is doing the IPOs, so the initial public offering. No? That's the job of a promoter. So who is actually a promoter? It's usually a bank, most of the time. Investment bank or something like that. So, yeah, I will put another bracket and put there like banks. Okay, so now I want you to, how to put it? I want you to think of who, I mean, what they are doing is they are selling a company. Here's a company, and the promoter here is selling this company to the public, which is here. So to whom they are selling it? Okay, they are selling it to the public. Until now, still comprehensible, I think. So what are they doing thereby? That is the interesting part. So what is actually happening when the promoter is selling something to the public? And there, let's put it in a small screen or picture or however overview. Here, I do have a color. Okay, so we do have how do you call that? Like an example, picturesque description. I don't know. I won't just put anything. I will just make an equal sign. So we do have a corporation, yes. Corporation. That is symbolized here by this strange circle, which is even not completely close, but it doesn't matter. So we have the corporation, and the corporation has, of course, an investment. I mean, the corporation is investing in something. To produce something, it needs to invest in something. So it needs to have an investment. For example, we can take the Boston Manufacturing Company. So let me put here, let's put it here, investment. And this is actually the investment number one. Yes, because I mean, a company is not only investing in, I mean, maybe he's investing only in one thing, but regularly not. But in this case, this is only the first one that we have a look at. So, yeah, maybe I can also, which, let's put it that, no, excuse me, I'm a little bit picky with that. So, here, invest. Of course, a corporation invests in an investment, and yeah, you download something else with it. Okay, so this is the first investment. We can say, for example, this could be, for example, clothing, or a machine for clothing. Yes, some production machine. I just put it here like production machine, which you can't read anyways. I know. So production machine, this is the investment, and what happens by this step? Corporation, me and the corporation, and there is my investment, and I invest in the investment, so suddenly I have an investment. I have a strange production machine that me as the owner usually I don't understand even. And so now I've had cash, now I have a machine. Okay, fine, but the machine is worth the cash. In the moment I buy it, at least in just this moment. And so, but then it is still worth something. But of course it's declining all the time because of the amortization rate. So what happens is my capital, my good old cash, then is bound in this investment. So have in mind that crap, excuse me, that this thing here means capital bound in investment. It is now not accessible anymore. It is illiquid, more or less. Of course, I can also sell the machine, but it's quite difficult to sell the machine. Yeah, especially when it's like brand new and only a few people can handle this stuff, and so on and so forth. So now, as I mentioned, we are having a look at at our promoter. So our promoter, I will put him just here, promoter, and this is now, we say the bank, could be also something else that has a similar function. So this is the promoter. The promoter's job is to put this corporation, actually, which includes investment number one in terms of property, to the, which color we do use now? We just use black if it's working. To the public market, and the public market I would put just here. Public market. Okay, so the job of this guy here is to somehow transfer the worth of this corporation, which includes this investment, into the public market, and thereby generating more worth. You know, I mean, that's the goal. I mean, he don't just want to present it to the public and say, hey, just do whatever you want with it. No, they want to make money. I mean, the corporation wants to make money, and it needs money, because imagine, you invest in something, you have a huge machine now, and yeah, your capital is bound, but you want to invest more. I mean, you want to grow, don't you? So what you need a solution. You cannot just sell your machine, because then you don't have the machine anymore, but you need the machine to have some profit, to generate profits in the first place. So what is happening now? To solve this problem, the promoter is of course a nice guy, says, all right, I will have a look at the capital which is bound in the investment, and I will of course assess that amortization and stuff like this. But of course he's also having a look. Let me see if I can put a straight line. Ah, quite good. He's also having a look, of course, at the corporation itself. I mean, it's not only the combination. The corporation is not existing just in this one investment. Of course, has some other assets as well. So, is also assessing these two things. I mean, and thereby, by accessing these two things, it is, let's put it here, determining price per share, because yeah, somehow. So thereby he just determines the price per share, and then the question is like, how many shares do you want to put out there to this public market? How much money can you get? How much shares will be bought at the initial offering? So what happens thereby is that I will just put it as an own circle here, this capital, but it belongs to this investment. Then it is I forgot the name in English, how that is called. Well, so where's red? Here. What happens is the capital which is bound in this investment goes to the public market. Of course, I mean the promoter, via the promoter, so to say. Okay, so meaning bound capital becomes suddenly available, but actually you have to ask yourself, to whom? Who is this public market, and what else happens? So how do I put it? Bound capital, we can just say gets liquid again, or becomes liquid. Because what happens is Okay, they assessed it, then they determined the price for share, and then they offer it, or they selling it out to the public. That's how they called it. So now the public is buying these shares, but where did they actually come from, so to say, and who is the public? So let us follow that question step by step, ladies and gentlemen. And okay, here we just put it here at the side. So to whom? Yeah, yeah, you know what is meant. To whom it is sold, the share. Okay, first seems like a simple question. We say, well, to the public, isn't it? To the well, let's put it that way. It is sold now to the owners. So first of all, we say to the owners, because who becomes the owner when one buys a share of the company, of the corporation, excuse me, of the company corporation. Well, who who is then the owner when the shareholder is the owner then? Because that's the transfer, the transition of property in the first part. So the owners. So this is actually a little bit confusing, at least for me, which are now the public, meaning we are talking about shareholders. So, meaning now the corporation, as we've seen before in theory, now is distinguished from owner and property. Thereby is also to control, like put in a separate place. So now the question is, who? Yeah, exactly. The question that I have now is, who then is in control of the instruments of production? Okay, so we know. Okay, sold um, to the owners, so shareholders, but control of production. Let's put it short. Who is in control of the production? Well, the management. Who's the management? Tell me. The board. The board of directors. So the board. And who's the board? The board are some people which get elected. So there should be some rules, I guess, for this election process. Or yes, and that is corporate governance, is determining these goals. But more about that in the other lectures and so on. So the board of directors generally is in control of the instruments of production, or better say, let's just say production. So, but the board, a nice feature of the board is that the board is not really sustainable in the long term, because the board is actually interchangeable. So what does that mean? So what does it mean? No, or we put it the other way around. Imagine this was investment one. This is happening, all that is happening here by investment one. But what happens now? I mean, this circle is done. So what happens now if they want to? I mean, are they satisfied then? No, because as we said before, the goal is only growth. So they need to invest in an investment too. So what happens? I mean, or now you can repeat this circle. Always repeat this circle and repeat this circle and repeat this circle, and just imagine what happens thereby. Yeah, I mean, like, what actually happens? Let us put it. How can I coin it? Like, the money which is bound into the capital of their of their investment, of the company's investments. Yes, how does it exactly become available, even though nothing here in particular has changed? I mean, the machine is still there. Uh, Only the owner changed, and thereby somehow they got more money because they have now more actual owners, which don't own the product. So it's funny to me somehow because it's so weird, this system. Um, so nothing has changed actually. So the investment still costs money. I mean, like, this machine is still operating, and the machines are also, I mean, it's still existing. So where does this freed money actually come from? Where does it come from? Can you answer that? Can you answer that? No, but imagine, where does it come from? Okay, it comes from the public market. I get that is the easy question, easy answer. But where does this public market gets the money? So, okay, what happens if someone, a participant of the public market, an individual, for example, another company, it could be, um, is buying some shares, stocks, whatever, they are receiving voting rights, therefore. And where does the public get their money from to invest in the corporation? What I asked before is, yeah, well, for example, for when they are, or in case they are just another corporation that just looks for ways to invest their money, which recently got freed by the same process. You know, what? I mean, just a question. Does that remind you just on something? I mean, it reminds me definitely on various things. And the first thing it reminds me is that this system does strictly not allow anything else but growth. Do you see that? Because this is like, you can put it like, it's like when you throw a stone in the sea, in a plain water or whatever, it creates these waves. So it's actually the same. So this process is happening one time. Then another company, as I mentioned, which is part of the public market, is buying these stocks of this corporation by money that they received by the same process, and which they need to invest now into something new. So then you have the next circle. So actually the money of the first investment was now given to the public market. Thereby, the public market itself became an owner. One of these owners is a company that got the money from the same way that they got it. So they also need to invest their money into something to generate more profits for themselves in the future. But actually, nothing has changed. The only thing that they have done is to exchange money, and thereby not to exchange money, to actually to just offer themselves to a mass of other, well, investors, so to say, to the public. And thereby the public invests the money which they receive on the same way they receive it. So where is it actually coming from? Because I mean, the public itself is the public. Where the money from the public is coming from? That's the question. Do you get me? Do you get me? But I mean, this is important stuff. This means a lot, really, because actually it's just waves. Have a look at it. Nice waves. I mean, that are not waves, but you can imagine what I mean. Yes, and it is repeating. It's getting, and thereby, what is also nice to see here is that the radius is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the system is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, by giving it to the public, which then is the owner of the same thing. I mean, they do the same thing. So where is it coming from? It just gets bigger. It's, for me, it's fascinating to be reminded of that. So it becomes a bet actually on the next investment. That's basically what it is. Because I mean, once they have received the money, once the money is freed, they need to invest it in in the next investment, which is not yet in place. So it is a situation of the future. It cannot be of the past. Until these days, at least not. And this means what this system needs is, that's why I meant it is only restricted to growth, because it cannot handle anything else. If it is not growing, it completely will collapse. That's the only option. Simple. So there's growth needed. And okay, so that far. And do you know, I mean, like, do you remember that scene from Wolf of Wall Street, from, how was he called? McConaughey or something. McConaughey, I don't know, with with Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah. So it's funny because this is also mentioned in another. I mean, in many of these banking crises or banking movies, they actually say that. They say it is not existing, and it reminds me, at least. I mean, the first thing is that it reminds me of that it must be only. It's a bet on the future. It must be growth or nothing. And the second thing is that that is actually a Ponzi scheme, and it reminds me on that, because if, I mean, the Ponzi scheme is defined, um, or better to say, is an investment fraud, actually, which pays existing investors funds collected from new investors. And what's happening here? What's happening here? They get funds by new investors, while these new investors are people which get the money from the same procedure. So actually, they pay existing investors, because, I mean, they have investors, they have investments, so they have also investors, and I mean, the public market are the investors, and they pay them with funds collected from the new investors, which are they themselves. I mean, which is, of course, a part of it. I mean, this includes, I don't know how many thousand subgroups, you know, but this is imagine, I mean, like, then you take a little bit away, you take a piece of cake away from that subgroup, okay? You give it then to this subgroup, then you give it to this subgroup, then you give it to this subgroup. Then, I mean, like, who's actually gaining anything in the end? You know, that's why I come on this on this um, on this example. No, that's actually not the word I'm looking for, but it reminds me on that. I would like to know what you think about it. Can you think of anything else in that, or can you explain that to me, please? In case it is useful and logical and sensible, me a cat. All right, but okay, let's continue with the presentation. There's still some other stuff. All right. Time after this shock, after this astonishing shock. All right, it's time for some facts. Some facts, and we need to continue. We just don't mind that it is a Ponzi scheme. So, who was it? New York, for example, one of the first companies, I mean, besides the Boston Manufacturing Company, born, I wanted to say, founded in 1813, and who was predisposed to use this corporate form? Well, the railroads. And not the railroads themselves, but the railroad companies. So in what was it, 1853, I think, yes. 1853, the New York Railroad, what was it called? The New York Central Railroad, yeah, exactly. New York Central Railroad. Because why they were predisposed to that? Well, because it's actually super expensive to, I mean, it costs a lot to run a railroad company. If there's an owner of a railroad company, yeah, you will know. Nothing new to you. So I mean, like the costs are extremely high, so you need a lot of cash. So and who needs a lot of cash? Yeah, railroad companies. But I mean, like who profits from the corporate form by getting a lot of cash? Thereby, yeah, well, exactly these the corporate form. That's that's the way how I wanted to say it. So they were usually like the first ones to operate. No, because they were operating on a quite expensive level. They were the first ones. So 1853, that's quite early, and 1853 it was I think 10 companies, 10 created by exchange of stocks or bonds, better to say, in that time. 10 smaller companies. Okay, I know this is not so interesting like the one before. Beginning of the 20th century, so I can just put it here 1900. Then banks and insurances followed into, I mean, like, of course, into the corporate, everything related to the corporate form. Banks, insurances. So they were also now using the corporate form. As we see, it gets, it, it is all embracing. It starts. So, and in 1917, so not long after, imagine you are born 1900, maybe you are born 2000, and then 2017, you were 17. Not a surprise, isn't it? And in that time, basically everything, from the time you were a baby until you were 17 and almost done with school, if you were a good kid, then, well, then everything in that same time turned to be in the form of a corporation. So 100% of companies, corporate form. So from here on, we are done. From here on, it is unstoppable. All right. Well, so all companies do use the form, and this is actually a similar growth expansion than chain 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 companies. No, how is it called? Not chain suppliers. How is it called? Chain stores. From 1919 to 1927, there was a growth of 200, almost 300%. I think it was 287. I remembered it because it was 187. I was thinking, okay, let's put it on 287. So actually, this growth here, yes, this growth, similar to expansion of, so also that you have an idea, that is also happening at that time. They were so modern back then to have had these chain corporate, no, these chain, how is it called? These chain stores. Yes, they did. And similar to the expansion rate, chain stores, which was 287%. That is quite a lot, I would say. Okay, that also as a fact, and well, the only thing which was quite untouched, of course, all the ones were like in 1917, all the all the maybe I have to put it here, like all the companies and the banking companies are meant thereby. Because in the 1930s, I mean exactly in 1930, it was only a small segment left, which was not yet in the corporation form. And one of them was real estate. Real estate fought until the end. But actually in 1930 there was already the creation of a market in New York. So they were not safe as well. Nothing was safe from the corporation. So what maybe is also important is that even the government use these corporate forms. Yes, actually they do. And that was also around the time that the book was written, so 1932. And the port of the New York Authority, I think Port of New York Authority, they got into, so I put it here like 1930s government uses corporate form as well. So do you see, like it is all embracing, and that this was the Port New York Authority, which then used the corporation form, and thereby was of course also available to the public market. So the public market becomes a shareholder of a state institution. Interesting. Which implications does that have? I mean, that's just a question for you to have in the back. All right, so now maybe we can ask ourselves many things, but besides these many things, I want to ask, like, how do these corporate forms actually dominate? So what makes them so dominating, and how do they do that? I mean, there has to be something. So because still our question is like, how did it appear? I mean, how the corporate form appeared, and maybe it's quite interesting to know, quite good to know, why, I mean, how they were dominating the field. If you want to gain some power, then then you have to listen up now, just to have a better understanding, of course, understanding it. So actually, I think we can answer it like in with two key factors. Like what was the question? What was the question? How do they dominate? How? Imagine in school. Nah. I mean, I would, I would not be good in school because I forget my own questions. And actually, I think I explained it quite okay because I don't take it serious too much. And you know, teachers always did that. I didn't like. All right. How corporate form dominates. Dominates. How do they do it? That's what we want to know. And I said, yeah, I would put it in like two things, two key factors, or just two factors. You don't need to say key factors. That would implicate that there would be more factors which then are not key factors. So I think the first thing is the public character of the activity in question. So public character, activity, question. I have a question besides. Is it boring for you to see me writing? Then I'm really sorry you have to still go through it. No, but I I really wanted to know that because I don't know if I would find it boring. So therefore, I want to know your opinion. Second is of course, the other thing is a quite technical thing how they dominate, and that is actually the amount of fixed capital that is available. So amount of fixed capital to carry on business, of course. Available capital to carry on business. These are the two things, the two forms, how they do dominate. And thereby, maybe one can say that these semi-public forms now don't just mean that this is a new clothing for a private company. No, no. This means a complete new, it adds a complete new quality, and that is multiple ownership. As I mentioned already somewhere before, this here It is not, and this is not a. That's what I try to to get through. Is this is not just a simple thing. Because it has. I mean, like government is using this form. It looks like it's a Ponzi scheme. It's affecting everyone. It's affecting everyone's lives. So multiple ownership is a thing. All right. Maybe, yeah. Well, that's the one thing. But maybe I can also, I can, of course. But maybe I mention also a small excurse on the concentration. Where did I put that here? Ah, let's use another color. I don't know which one. Okay. Concentration. What happens thereby to the concentration of economic power? Any idea? Feel like in school. What happens to the concentration of economic power? You remember? I just said it somewhere before. What has happened? Well, it's this centripetal, the nice fancy word, centripetal. I will just write it again, that you can enjoy this fancy word. Centripetal is, so to say, one thing. And the other thing is that the control, I mean, the aggregation, the attraction, centripetal attraction on the aggregation of wealth. That's what I want to say. Holy. Control, while, I mean, plus control, and that should be known now already, in fewer hands, yes. One thing, okay, that was known already. Then I think I've mentioned it. I've scratched it a little bit. In 1972, the general profit of an average sized business, of an average sized corporation, was $5,000. I think I put it already before. So, but the assets they were holding were 570K. So why is that the case? That's actually the case for these super huge players like Warner Brothers and Kodak and all these ones that they were in this top 200. Who's actually rating these things, these top 200, as our good old friend Moody's, which rated some mortgage-backed securities AAA, while there was actually inside XXX or epsilon. So crap basically. And yeah, so they actually made also these ratings. So the numbers are coming from Moody's, with which I'm throwing around here. And just in comparison, so 5,000 euros is the profit generally in 1927. And the how was it called? American Telephone and Telegraph Company, the largest company back then, the largest corporation, owned 8,000 times the assets of an average sized corporation. You know, like these 570K. Oh, and that's also, by the way, why the assets are that high, because for the huge players, as I said, the statistics, of course, are distorted. Well, so imagine like a company that owns 8,000 times the assets of an average sized company. Yeah. What do you want to say? This is just the scale we are looking at when we are saying like, okay, centripetal, and the other thing is centrifugal. So this is what it means: 8,000 times average sized company. If you're lucky and you are a son or a daughter, or not even that, you are the father or mother of not of, or you are a holder of a mid-sized business, then you're doing quite good. And imagine now, someone comes along and tells you, you know, all the assets, and then you know about the assets you do have, And this person owns just, I mean, this corporation owns them just 8,000 times as much as you have. That's a lot. And especially in that time. So, okay, so the big picture is these 200, and actually these are non-banking corporations, these 200 that I mentioned all the time, banks are not included, in 1930, they in total own $81 billion. So, all right, that fell down. Top 200, 1930s, 1930 actually, 81 billion USD. Okay, so quite a lot. But the interesting thing of that, because I mean, this is just numbers, you know. I could have said whatever number, would not mean much to you because anyway, we cannot imagine these numbers. Of these 81, the half of the corporate, I mean, the half of all the corporate wealth in the US was thereby owned by these 200 corporations. And this is a little bit crazy. So 50% of corporate wealth, the corporate wealth, really, owned by 200 companies. Okay, I mean, yeah, if you compare it with numbers these days, not that different. It's even following this development. All right, so just that you get a feeling for what these number and these words, the centripetal and centrifugal and the development and all that stuff actually means. This is what it means, and this is then referred by the authors to call it like this is leading to the revolution of growth. Then before it was another revolution, now we have the revolution of growth, and because that was the case, because the large, how was it? I mean, the large corporations grew 2/3, so 66%, so let's say 70%, yes, times faster than, I mean, as all non-corporate financial, non-financial corporation. Holy shit, I'm so sorry for my confusion today. Imagine 70% faster. You know what that means? 70%. Imagine, I mean, you have 1,000 or I have 1,000 euros, and yeah, well, you just maximize it 70% faster than everyone else. Yes, it's good for you, of course. You will be super rich. And then, what happens then? That's the question, and that's also the question you can ask yourself here. Like, what is the end of this development? But let's continue a little bit. Like, but an interesting thing thereby is, you know, like 70% faster as all non-financial corporations. Meaning, remember from the picture from before, who is actually the one which does the IPOs? Who are freeing the capital? It's banks. So it's financial corporations, and and they are growing 70 times faster than all non-financial um, corporations. That is really surprising, isn't it? Really surprising. Well, they are the ones which are responsible, therefore, that the circle continues, can continue actually. Without them, it couldn't. It's their interest to perpetuate that situation, to make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, while actually nothing changes. In the future, it changes. Maybe.